intention is one of these concepts in yoga that, unless we are willing to continually examine and re-examine and bring more nuance and complexity and understanding to, risks becoming one of these sort of wellness buzzwords, right? Intention. What does intention actually mean, and how do we work with it in practice? So, we have on the one hand, we have the saying, the idiom in English, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And what does that mean? That does mean that, even when we set a good intention and we try to act from that intention, that it doesn't always have the desired outcome. It doesn't always have the desired result. And currently in our, sort of social discourse, there's a lot of discussion about how impact is more important than intent, right? Which seemingly goes against the yogic idea that intention is the most important part of the equation. So here we're holding two seemingly opposite ideas, but I'd like to see how maybe we can understand both ideas simultaneously through our yoga practice. So, so first of all, I think the idea that working with our intention, that working with our thoughts is the most important part, is critical to a yogic practice, because our thoughts produce our words, and our thoughts also directly influence our actions, right? Everything that we sort of do outwardly in the world begins with the environment of our mind. And that's why meditation is incredibly important, and that's why rigorous practice is also important. What I mean by that is, for example, we have the yamas and the niyamas. We have these guardrails to our actions towards others and also towards ourselves, in order to better examine the relationship between action and intent. So one of the many ways to think about yamas in particular, let's just deal with yamas because that's dealing with outward actions towards others and by extension in our relationships. So the yamas are there in one sense to give us a framework for which to examine how intention and action relate to one another. And many, many times, of course, we will observe our actions not matching our intention, or our words not matching our actions, right? We'll start to see these mismatches within the confines of practicing the yamas. So just like a scientist, in order to understand the world better, has to, do a study that puts some limitations on the variables that they're studying. In the same way, you could say that practicing the yamas puts some limitations on the variables in order that we can better understand the system that we're dealing with. In this case, rather than a biological or chemical or physical system, we're trying to examine the system of relationship between mind and action, between thought, word, and action. So to get back to the point here, as we practice those, we start to examine the ways in which the mind, our actions don't align with our intention, and we get to examine whether, how that got out of alignment and how to get it back into alignment. Or we can examine also how we can sort of retroactively create, sorry that you can hear Sunny playing with his favorite toy in the background, apologies. We can also observe how the mind can make some justifications retroactively for our actions. So there's a wonderful book that I highly recommend. It's called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. And it's a wonderful book that combines sort of sociology and psychology to examine the ways in which we, as human beings, it's very natural. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good. But the natural way in which we tend to overemphasize our own intention behind our actions, and we tend to overemphasize other people's actions regardless of their intention. So, in other words, we tend to place more importance on how people behave, and we tend to place more importance with regards to our own behavior on how we intended, right? On what we, on our idea of ourselves as a good person. So I think this is an incredible book, especially for any yogis or anyone on the spiritual path to read, because it really, at the very least, it allows us to see that bias, to see that cognitive bias in ourselves. And then once we know that that bias is at play, we can be more honest and self-reflective about our own intentions and actions. And we can also perhaps give a little bit more space and forgiveness for other people's actions that we would, typically be judgmental of or what have you. Great book, highly recommended. So in other words, we do need to be careful about how our actions affect others, and we do need to take responsibility for if our actions have created unintended harm or intended harm. But also, I hope that we can see that intention being the most important part of any action. It means a continuous examination of the relationship between intention and action is the most important thing. But it doesn't mean, it wasn't my intention to trip you and steal your dog and take all your money and flee the country. My intention was good because I'm a good and loving person, right? I don't think it means use your intention retroactively to excuse behavior. I think it means continuous work on the self, and part of that is, taking accountability when our actions haven't matched our intention, is the most important part. So working on our mind is the most important part. And the yamas are a great tool for examining that process, as well as meditation. Getting really deep into meditation and understanding our mind, understanding where our motivations and intentions arise from, understanding the thoughts, biases, quirks of our personality that sort of get in the way or that are at least at play in our thoughts, words, and actions. So it's all a very deep and nuanced discussion to sort of immerse ourselves in. And at the very least, setting intention, for me over the years, setting intention for a yoga practice minimally puts me in the practice of at least attempting to think about myself 1 hour less per day, right? Like if we were to categorize all thought during the day, during the 16 hours that I'm consciously awake, if we were to evaluate how many times I think about myself and how many times I think about others, even as a yogi and a meditator and an altruistic person and a person who commits themselves to service, I still think about myself more during the day than I think about others. And that's not bad or wrong, but at the very least, I remember it, like in the early days of my practice, I was even more sort of wound up in myself, even though it was in the form of like shame and self-consciousness and insecurity. That's still all being wound up in self. And in those years, it was extremely valuable for me to set an intention for someone other than myself and practice holding others in my awareness for at least one period of time throughout that whole day. I'll share one insight from our beautiful lineage. Sharon Gannon tells the story about Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, a beautiful chant that was given to them by Swami Nirmalananda in India, and became the central sort of mantra for Jivamukti yoga. And Sharon says that for many years, the commentary was just, may all beings everywhere be happy and free. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, may all beings everywhere be happy and free. Which is the closest, sort of to the literal text. So one might occasionally wonder, so then where does the part about, and may my own thoughts, words, and actions contribute in some way to that freedom and happiness for all? And she said that at a certain point during the Jivamukti tradition at the studio, there was some, disagreements and misunderstandings, and maybe even some like jealousy between teachers and such like that. And she realized that like the Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu part wasn't sort of sinking in. It wasn't integrating into the practice, but sort of staying as this thing that we say. But like, how do we, bring what we say every day into our actual integrative process, right? And so that's when she had the sudden genius inspiration to elucidate, to name the actual, may my thoughts, words, and actions, it is my responsibility to bring about freedom and happiness, right? And may my thoughts, words, and actions be oriented in that direction. And then there's this beautiful part, which I can't remember if Sharon said explicitly or not, but there's this beautiful part that I like that says, may my actions in some way contribute. So keeping that sense of humility involved. Like, I'll do my work, and I'll do my work in the world, and I certainly hope that my actions do something to contribute to the happiness and freedom for all. But I'm not sure that I know that yet, right? Like, I don't know that I will make the right action. I'm not sure that I will say the right thing, but I will try, right? And that's part of it that I like too, is that it infuses a little bit of humility into it. So that last part, that might not be from Sharon directly. That might be my own interpretation. I can't remember if she said that or not. So first part, Sharon. Last part, my rambling. So anyway, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free, and may my thoughts, words, and actions contribute in some way as an offering to the happiness and freedom for all beings.